Lani, thanks so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. This is great.
Good stuff. Well, I am going to read a little intro so people know a little more about you. Lani Rodriguez is an artist and graphic designer from the San Francisco Bay Area. In 2016, she co founded Backtalk Videografica, a design and video production studio with her partner, Sarah Secunda. Her work is largely influenced by her working class, immigrant background, and queer popular culture. She spends a lot of time thinking about how we can heal the relationship to our bodies and how to visually amplify the power of women, non binary, and femme identifying people. This year, she is taking the leap into screenwriting, a recently discovered passion that feels more right by the day. All right. Well, again, thank you. I think this is going to be a very rich and inspiring conversation. So,
Cool. Yeah.
yes, let us start. When you and I had our pre-call and you were sharing about your journey of healing and getting to know yourself better, you said something that really stood out to me. You said, "People like me often don't get to where I am, so I want to share my journey." Would you say a little bit more about what that means to you and
Yeah.
what the journey has been like?
Yeah. I grew up in a working class immigrant family where you work all the time. Parents are workers. My dad was worked as a welder. My mom worked for the county in like social services. You know, you go home, you're tired, you come home, and then you usually watch TV, and then you have dinner and you go to bed. That was kind of what we did. We didn't talk about mental health. We didn't know what that was. We had
Mm,
no tools for naming anything. So that was our world. Like that was the world that we had, right? We kind of looked to media and cinema to kind of make us feel something good. And, you know, we had joy in a lot of other areas, but I think starting from that place, I didn't have a lot of tools for understanding myself. And that comes from a number of things. Intergenerational trauma, which is something that I've learned over the years, has definitely been a part of my family and a ton of families. It's just, I
hmm.
think we're finally in a moment culturally where like you can, you know, with the Instagram and like all these social media tools where people are talking about, you know, naming your feelings and getting to know who you are and, you know, setting what a boundary is or, you know, the ways
Yeah.
that we kind of learn to slowly kind of shut ourselves down as we grow up. And, you know, we start out so full of joy as children. And I think adolescence particularly is like like a really hard time in this world, in this country is a very hard time for kids.
Yeah.
Um, Especially when, you know, you might not have like role models really around you doing different things than the people that you know directly around you. So you can't know all those other ideas. You can't get exposed to it. And so there
Hmm.
was a number of things that came into play like when I finally was able to get there. A lot of it's like luck. It was my own kind of frustration with it all and be like, I have to take risks. If nothing is going to change in
Mm.
my life if I don't take a risk, this is just going to have to get uncomfortable. And I think that was the moment of being like, okay, I've always tried so hard to like survive in a way where like I just don't want to be noticed. Don't like I just want to be in the background, just quiet. I was the quiet kid, you know, just yeah. You just shut yourself. You learn to kind of shut your who you are down for so long that you forget what it is to you just get so afraid of taking any risks or ever being
Mm.
uncomfortable. And then I think a big moment was kind of deciding I was just going to be really just try something new in my life because I was frustrated.
That's really powerful. And I know we didn't talk about how we met, but I just want to plug that you and I used to work together
Yeah, we
and
met on a boat.
we met on a boat. We met, yes, working for a cruise line company, and we were in their call center taking calls for reservations. And I remember it was that huge open office space, and you didn't have an assigned desk. So every time you showed up, you were sitting at a different desk. But you and I, for some reason, we ended up sitting next to each other a lot. And
Yeah,
you and I
it's
talked
true.
a lot. So,
We talked a
you
lot.
know, we did. We talked about
Yeah.
like movies and just whatever came to mind. But it was I always remember I remember you being quiet on the quieter side. I didn't feel like you were shy because maybe because you just felt comfortable after a while talking to me. I just was like, oh, she's a little quieter, but man, she has a lot to say. And so I'm curious, like when on your journey, you talked about being for a long time kind of wanting to just hide or kind of make yourself invisible. When did you or how did you start to take the steps to come out of that space, and say, "Hey world, I'm here. Yeah, I'm here."
Let's see. I studied sociology in school, in college. I got a BA in sociology. That helped me a lot. I found that by accident. I had to take a
Hmm.
part of general education classes that was a combination of sociology, anthropology, and ethnic studies, all wrapped up in one class. And that was my
Oh wow.
first exposure to like these ideas of thinking about yourself as in a place of like social classes or like
Mm.
you think about class systems and just how our society works and all these different things. So those ideas were spinning around prior to me really making any changes. I had professors that I really connected with and that I identified with, and that was for the first time. Like Black women were some of my greatest teachers. They had the most profound impact on me as a student in a number of different institutions. It was always like, I don't know. I just found that so powerful. It really helped me a lot. Like I give them so much credit for everything.
Do you
um,
feel like because sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just curious, do you feel like it was because they really saw you, like
yeah,
they
absolutely.
recognized that you were present? It
Absolutely.
wasn't just like you were
Absolutely.
another face and
Yeah, it wasn't like I got dismissed. So not dismissed because I was trying to hide, but I wasn't trying to get attention. But not every teacher is going to look at the quiet kid and be like, oh, you know, they must have a lot going on inside, or there must be so much there if they're just sitting in silence. Other people will grow
mm,
up in different ways where they talk all the time, they learn how to express their feelings, and so another teacher would really dismiss that and be like, I don't know what's wrong with them. Are they worth reaching? Like, I don't know. Like, so like
mm,
I always felt seen, and in my like I wouldn't talk much in class, but in my essays I would be able to really like show who I was, I think. And that was what was
oh,
recognized and really like nurtured in a way that I hadn't had before. So that was good at the very beginnings of me just feeling like I could be proud of my thoughts, because I feel like I didn't learn to critically think
mm,
in school until I was in college. Like I felt like so dumb and so like behind in a lot of my schooling, even though I got like B's and C's.
mm-hmm.
I just felt like I wasn't, like I was missing things that like were key to like understanding more.
Maybe you had a level of understanding, but maybe it just was because you hadn't expressed it, that
Yeah.
you felt like you weren't connected to that knowledge or that information. But I'm glad that college was a totally different experience.
Yeah. So that was kind of the beginning of these new ideas. And then I got frustrated with working the way I was working, like the whole like kind of 9 to 5, doing work that was really unrelated to what I studied in school, and just feeling like I had so much more to give in the world. And that really wears you down if you do that for a long time. Me personally, I just felt like so kind of exasperated and just like I didn't really know what I wanted to do for a career, like
Hmm.
in my family, you're lucky to like, get a job with the county, and then you'll get great retirement and like, benefits. And that's how we think. And there's nothing beyond that.
Hmm.
And that's reality for us. Like, that's not a bad thing. It's just the way it's said.
Right.
Like, that's what we're handed. Right. So it was a mix of kind of this kind of emotional turmoil I was in, mixed with this frustration over like the work I was doing, and that I think made me at one point be like, I'm going to apply to grad school in New York. And I was living in the Bay Area at the time. So I think that was
Mm.
the first leap. And my brother had gone to New York as a teenager and studied over there. I think taking that risk, applying to school and actually getting in, gave me a ton of confidence into a program
Yeah.
that only accepted like 15 people. That gave me a ton of
Oh.
confidence that maybe, wow, like someone else believes in what maybe I'm doing, or they want to give me a chance. So I have to take it. So yeah, I like
Yeah.
flew away. I think leaving where I was from was a really big help, just in a way to experience more of the world. Because I grew up in a largely immigrant community, which was the best thing in the whole world. And like I love it today. Like I want to move back to the Bay. Like I can't wait to move. I'm in
Mm.
Massachusetts right now, but I can't wait to go back to the Bay, because that is like my home forever. you know,
Mm.
no matter how it changes, that place is like my home forever. And what I was exposed to was such a gift that
Mm.
so many people, now moving away, so many people do not have that experience of the world that I have. Now I hold a tremendous amount of like value in what I know because, because of where I came from. I know like a lot more than some people out here. Just in
Mm-hmm.
terms of how to interrelate, to talk to people who come from different cultures or like, might not speak English. Like people get intimidated or are scared of talking to, they're not comfortable with difference. A lot of people are not comfortable
Yeah.
being, with like people who are different. It's just very unsettling for them. And whereas me, I'm like, I grew up with that in kindergarten. Half of the kids didn't speak English, It was just like, and they're all like, oh, they
Mm.
were largely recent immigrants, and we're all just figuring it out together. And so, like, that stuff was squished pretty quickly.
That definitely sets you up for possibly a different experience in the world.
Yeah. College helped a lot. College is where I met my current partner of 7 years, Sarah. So it's been quite a journey. I mean, eventually I got into some therapy, which transformed my entire life. And there's major issues with accessibility to therapy. I think it should be free. It's a crime that it's not free. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it should, everybody needs this. And it's so, yeah, but therapy really gave me a place to figure out, like, I didn't go into it knowing how to do therapy. Like, I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know how to go in there and talk about my problems, like, or who I was. I didn't know what I needed, but I knew I needed something. you know,
Okay.
it was couples therapy. And so going in with another person, I think really helps clarify some things about like, oh, I'm here to maybe talk about like why this doesn't work. But then other
Mm.
things came up like, oh, when I've actually always been super self-conscious and worried about what everybody else thinks of me. And I learned to kind of value what everybody else told me I was, as opposed to having any sense of who I am in my own self. And so I think it
Mm.
was a process of learning that like I can choose how I think and feel about myself. And that was brand new.
Wow.
It's like brand
Yeah.
new information. I remember thinking like, oh my God, I mean, I can, the world is going to tell me all these things about my body and who I am and what I've accomplished and there's all these ways that we can like tear each other down and just feel like trash.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's beneficial to certain groups for us to feel like terrible about ourselves. And so the idea is that like I could choose how I feel about I can choose to like myself. I can choose to like,
Mm.
that was like a whole new idea. And it was not easy to come to that place. It was like a lot of undoing, a lot of painful things, like a lot of weight I was carrying around for decades, like when you're the quiet kid in class, that is exhausting. It's not easy to be quiet all the time. Like you have a
Mm.
lot of stuff that you just don't even know what to do with. You're just, or at least me, like I was like just quiet, anxious. When I met you, I think, I learned to be that cool kind of person that was just easygoing in all the ways. So I found my way to survive. Like my dad is a very
Mm.
charismatic, funny guy, tells great stories. Like I said, I come from a line of great storytellers, like such a gift. A lot of culture, a lot of art. I was exposed to a bunch of beautiful, beautiful things. But yeah, when it came down to real kind of emotional things, I didn't have the language for that. And
Mm.
oftentimes, like whenever I got uncomfortable, I would just check out and be like, bye. Like it was so easy to just ghost on people, just like not engage. It's so easy to just step back. And that was like my typical approach to things for a long time.
So when we met, you were saying that you were sort of more in survival mode. You can kind of go through the
Yeah,
motions of
yeah.
knowing how to
I could have a
interact with
good time.
people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I had
That's so
built this
interesting.
kind of personality of just like, and I didn't think about that at the time. That's just who I was. But
Mm.
it was also just who I was at the time, which
Yeah.
Um, but I love to
That's
tell jokes.
legitimate.
I love to like joke around. Yeah, I mean, by that point, I was a little different. In high school, I was pretty quiet. I had my like small group of friends, but I wasn't like how you met me. I wasn't that open of a person.
Okay. Yeah, you definitely I remember you were telling jokes, but I think I saw more to you than just that exterior like easygoing, because I know that no one's can always be completely easygoing. That's just not I know that that's just not truly like possible to like live in that and feel comfortable in that. But I think it was so meaningful to me, which is why I reached out to you after however 8, 9 years or however long it's been since we worked together, since we've really talked to each other, because I remember that when you and I kind of had our one-on-one communications and shared, I always felt there was depth there, you know? I always felt like you could talk about meaningful things and deeper things than just like whatever was kind of the trend on trend or, you know? So I think for me, that was what I saw in you. And like you're saying, that was just where you were at in your evolution. Like we have these different versions of ourselves. It's not that we can like deny those versions because that is legitimately who we are at that time. We're working in the best way we can with the consciousness and with the kind of the knowledge that we have. So I appreciate you saying like, yeah, that's where I was at. You know, I've evolved since then, but that's where I was at.
Yeah. It's weird because on the one hand, in my family, it's like there was so much art and culture, and my parents are very honest, loyal, good faith. Like Sarah says, good faith operators. I come from a line of good faith
Mm,
operators. You know, we're not going to like do people wrong. Once we kind of, it takes us a while to trust certain people, but those who we trust, they're like part of us. You know, we'll never like wrong people in those ways. So I think that is a core part of me that I have, that I greatly value, that I think maybe it's some of what I mean, I always felt like you were very like good at reading people and like just had like a very kind of sense of that you had done some healing like already, or that you had like just understood people, or like had done a lot of self care and things like that. I remember you used to talk about like, you used to be able to identify like little bits of you're like, oh, I'm feeling a little low energy. I'm going to like eat some salmon and maybe a little bit of this. And I was always like fascinated that you like could tell that much about your body. I was like, that's awesome. I was like, you're so in tune with it all. Like, I love it. Like, I wouldn't know what to do. Like, maybe now a little bit more, but I was just really at that time
yeah.
when we used to talk, I just always was like fascinated by that.
I really appreciate that you appreciated that. That's
Yeah.
so funny that
I was
that
like,
stood out
wow,
to you.
Tiff like knows exactly, or you're like, I'm going to try cutting out wheat for like a little while and see how I do. You know, I was like, yeah.
I love it. Yeah, it's only gotten more intense, girl. But it's because I've gotten more in tune. I think, and that's interesting what you're saying, because I don't think that's like a side note. I think that the more work we do to get to know ourselves, the more healing we do. You're right. I've gone through a lot of healing in my life, and at the point we met each other, I had done some significant healing, although there was more to do at that point in time. It's like as we heal ourselves emotionally and spiritually, like we evolve. And so I think that our food and like how we nourish our bodies evolves to it's part of the process, and we're not taught that. So I think that, yeah, I'm grateful that I kind of just took that on my own as like a no, I'm gonna figure this out. But I love that, yeah, that stood out to you. Yeah, it's just part of the journey. I am curious, when you talk about going to therapy, which I agree with you, it should be free or just much more accessible to people. Like, why keep people from that kind of empowering tool? When you went through the process or started the process of therapy and started to become more self-aware and start to address whatever past challenges, traumas, whatever you were faced with, how was it when you then went back home or interacted with your family? Like, were they like on board, like, oh, this is cool? Or was it like, oh, what is she up to? What's going on there?
So I had been in therapy for quite a while before I even brought it up to my family, just because it was all very new, and also, like I said, exhausting and hard emotionally. I was kind of changing. I was transforming in such a profound way that, you know, our parents know like certain versions of us. You know, we come as certain versions to them, right? And so I didn't feel safe to be that vulnerable yet, to be in this kind of messy place yet. I kind of had to wait a little while to feel like it stabilized some,
Mm.
or who I was becoming had kind of, or a lot of the stuff that came up had kind of hit some place of stasis for like a minute. It was good. I think my mom particularly was like fascinated with it all. in terms of what I was learning. She called it being enlightened. Like, oh, you're kind of hit this point where you've been like enlightened, and I thought that was an
Mm.
interesting word. I had never thought about that word in particular, but she was fascinated by it all. It was definitely like a open, curious kind of the way she received it. It's like very open and curious. Asked a lot of questions, and then I was living, like I said, on the East Coast. She lives in the Bay Area, and then when I went home, like there would be even more conversations that could happen face to face that really were
Mm.
really, really rich and good, helpful, healing, I think, for both of us. Yeah.
So nice.
My, yeah. My dad hasn't asked me too much about it. I mean, I think we all have different relationships with our parents. I think there's a he like deeply, I think, respects me a lot, and how
Mm.
I've changed and like who I am now, and that he's proud of me. He always has been,
That's
but I think, he's proud of who I am now.
Yeah. And also, I
Mm.
think distance also makes bonds become stronger, when you don't
Yeah,
live so
yeah.
close because there's some time and space to think about the other person and
Mm-hmm.
appreciate them. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that they've been
Yeah,
supportive. And how is it for you? People talk about this idea of going like grown adults talk about going back home for the holidays or just going home to visit and they become like 12 years old again sometimes.
mm-hmm.
Is it like from your perspective, do you find yourself able to kind of walk that new stance that you've created and in terms of having this awareness, is it
Yeah,
comfortable or is it
yeah.
and do you find yourself like exploring? I'm curious, like more are you more reflective now that you're more aware? Are you more reflective of what's going on with your
Oh yeah.
family and the dynamics?
Oh yes. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, yes, affirmative.
Yeah, you see everything in a different way. When after you have therapy and you go back home, you're going to see a whole new world. You see everything differently. Everything from everything, everything, expressions, mannerisms, ways,
Mm,
dynamics, ways of engaging, ways that maybe like things that might have been like unhealthy in the past, or like kind of the result of like not really having any sense of what boundaries are, right? Even like just emotional, not even like there
mm,
was violence or anything like that, but it was just kind of,
right.
ways that we would all learn to like engage with one another that would just felt comfortable because it had happened that way for so long. But actually, when I went to New York, is the year that my parents split up, and so I think that basically created whole new dynamics in general. My parents had stayed together. I think it would be more difficult to go back home, actually.
Mm,
But since they split apart, I kind of experienced them alone, each one, and that was, I guess, easier because they were going through all new things, and so was I. So we could all just arrive as new, changing people, which is just how it worked out. But yeah,
yeah.
it's hard. It's hard. I mean, I'm not a therapist. I can only tell people what I've learned. So I have a whole other set of feelings about, kind of wanting people to realize things about maybe themselves or how they operate. But I'm like, that's not my place. It's not like I can't. You hear a lot about it, like on Instagram, on social media. You're like, you can't fix other people. At some point, like you can't just tell them everything and they're just automatically going to get it all. Like that. It doesn't happen that way. Everybody has their own journey and makes their own progress or doesn't, and like that's just how. I've arrived at a place of peace with that for quite like maybe 2 3 maybe like 2 years. It was hard, and it kind of made me a
Mm,
little bit depressed to think about the ways in which like almost like survivor's guilt, a little bit of like, oh, I've been able to
mm,
get a tremendous amount of opportunities, and because of all these different factors, and folks that my family and other folks I know haven't been able to access those things. And so, but I think when I return and I'm a different person, like they have to engage with me differently, right? So I think they've been open to that.
right.
I don't think there's been like a lot of resistance in that way. They're more fascinated, I think, because, like I said, new ideas. Like you got a new idea, someone interacts with you different for the first time ever, and you're like, you have to change. It changes you. It changes you. It has to. Even if it's uncomfortable or you
Absolutely.
shut it out or you're like, oh, I don't want to, why are you acting like that with me? Like, it's going to change you. You're going to go think about it later because it was something new that happened to you.
Yes. Yes, you dropped so many little gems just now. Yes, I feel the same way about Well, one thing you said, which I resonate with, is this desire of wanting people to change. For me, I think there's a difference between like wanting people to change, and like almost, being judgmental that they haven't or that they won't or that they aren't. There's a difference between that, obviously, and then just knowing what it's like to taste more sweetness and wanting that for other people. Do you know? I mean, I went through that in my own life when I really started to heal and evolve. I was just like, but I just want those around me to experience this. It's not that I want to be controlling or that, I want to be critical and judgmental of them, but I just want to see them experience this new state of being, which is going to look different for everybody when they do their work, but it's something that is gives us hope. And I think that's also kind of what you were saying was really touching about your family, not being resistant to your evolution, but being like fascinated and wanting to, being open to engaging with you in this new era. To me, that speaks so much to culture. And I don't just mean like ethnic or national culture, I mean family culture. It's like you're not coming home like with drama necessarily, or you're not coming home in a worse state where it just causes more problems for the family. You're coming home, like your mom said, in an more enlightened state. And that's really beautiful that your family acknowledges that and recognizes that, because they see that as a good thing. For some families, when one person does well, they do want to tear that person down, right? Because, oh, why do they get something good? Why can't I get, it becomes that like competition and like, well, you're not going to win. I'm going to make this like, I want to turn this into a lose-lose situation. Whereas like in your family, it's so beautiful because it's like, oh, someone in the family is stepping forward to like change the family. Like you're part of changing the family culture, even if right now it's just kind of mostly you who's maybe taken that journey. Although I know you shared your mom has taken some steps on that journey too. So I find that really inspiring. You're serving as like a reflection to people in your family of like, oh, we can change. Things can get better. We don't have to stay. And we have like the next generation who's showing us that. I think that's speaks to the bigger picture of life. Like we're all here to get better. Like we talk about parents always say, I want something better for my kids. I think, and I know you and I spoke about this on our pre-call, but I think that a lot of times people are saying they want materially things to be better for their kids, but they aren't necessarily talking about emotional, spiritual. And when I say spiritual, I simply mean like virtues,
Yeah.
Like that inner character that
Oh
you're
yeah.
developing. I don't know if they're always talking about the emotional, spiritual. And to me, that's like kind of the most critical because, you can get by on meager means, but man, if you're living in joy and you're like, really, trust yourself and care about your well-being, like that just makes life so much sweeter. So yeah,
But
what
it's
you shared
hard.
really brought up a lot of feelings and thoughts for me.
Yeah, but it's hard when you come from like a line of, trauma, especially for women. Women what couldn't get a women used to get married to survive. Like they couldn't get a bank account in their own bank account in this country till like pretty recently. I mean, if you think of all
Mm-hmm.
history. So it's like there was so little space to figure yourself out. Like I think it's the sign of the times too that I'm able to even heal in this way, to do this, to do what I do, to work the way I do, to break maybe some traumatic lines, that have passed
Yeah.
through, is because of this moment. Like I don't know if it could have happened sooner culturally, just because it's been so hard. I mean, there wasn't the language for it.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of just
Barriers,
things
huh?
have been crap for women for like a long time.
Yep. Well, I'm curious if you're interested in talking about it. You shared with me about some of your relationships, some of your romantic
Yeah,
relationships
yeah, yeah, yeah.
with women, and the challenge that you have experienced in your relationships with women, where in some cases they wanted you to, I think you described it as they wanted you to be more like a man or be more like a woman
Yeah.
or be more masculine, be more feminine, maybe. And for you, you were like, wait a minute, I just want to be myself in this relationship. I thought that was really an
Yeah.
interesting insight. And I would love to hear more about that experience.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because It wasn't until someone else told me that they had had the same experience, a queer person was like, oh, I've been in that same thing, that I was like, oh, this is a thing. Like, this is a thing like we don't talk about. Like, wow, it's like someone else has experienced this too. Like, that's important. We should talk about it, break it down. Because, yeah, at the beginning of a relationship, it could be like you don't see those things really happening as much. But then, after some time, there are just little things that come up that maybe show you, like, if I have a partner who's like femme presenting, like might wear makeup, or I kind of just always wear the same thing every day. It was like, like I don't really label myself in terms of like those like butcher femme. Like, I love that those terms are great. I love them. Like, they're awesome. But me personally, I've just kind of just always felt like identified as me. Like, I don't know. I never really decided to put like a word on it. But yeah, in my relationships, sometimes, I would get these messages of like, oh, I thought you were more of the man. Like, why are you doing that? Like, I had crossed a line to some degree. So I think there was maybe one instance where I wore something like a little bit more femme, like, or I maybe put some makeup on or something just for fun. And I got like some backlash. It wasn't a welcome. It was not a welcome thing. I got a little bit of frustration. Like, I was kind of destabilizing who my partner thought they were in relationship to me. So I'm like, if you're also femme, who am I? Like, and it just kind of rocked their world. It was very weird.
You said that they shamed you even in a sense.
Definitely. Yeah. There was another incident, another time when I was at a club dancing, and we were just dancing. And at the end of the night, it was like, my partner was upset that I think they thought I danced too feminine, and they wanted me to dance differently. Like, they had been angry, like basically some of the evening, that I guess I had danced in a way that was maybe like too, I don't know, sexy. Like, I don't know. I'm like Latina. Like, I grew up in a culture where we move a lot. Like,
Yeah.
I that's how I grew up dancing. So I don't know. But it was just kind of a wake up call that like, oh wait, like you want to be the sexy one, and then I'm the other part of that, like the opposite of you. And that's what makes you feel comfortable. And if I start just being me in these ways, like, it's going to be a problem. Like, it's not something that they enjoy, and then it makes me have to I feel like ashamed of how I expressed myself as a person. And I'm like, we're queer for a reason. Like, if I wanted to kind of reinterpret these, or just kind of reinterpret like just the same kind of like very hetero dynamics, like if I wanted to do that, like I would probably be straight.
Right. Yeah, I found that so interesting when you shared that. Like, what you said, this, one partner shamed you for not operating in the way they wanted you to operate. I mean, just as much as insight as you have into that person, is it in their mind? I guess they had clear ideas of like, okay, you're playing this role, I'm playing this role, and that was. Was there a conversation with them? Like, were they open to exploring?
I didn't have the language for that at the time. I was just something I felt very like inside, and then like it wasn't until like a couple of years later that I was like, or until I talked to someone at a party who was like, oh, I've been the man and the woman. Like, people have thought I was the man and the woman in my queer relationships too. I'm like, oh, like, let's talk about this. Wow. Like, these people who just kind of fall in between. Because some people are just like, I'm like this, I'm going to be this, I'm clearly this person. But,
right.
Some of the other, it's just, I think gender is introduced at such like a young age that I think it just has become such a part of who we are. And that's what you see with like a lot of toxic masculinity stuff. It's like, I have to be the man, and it's all of these things. And, if I'm not, then who am I? And it's like, we can be everything we want to be, like we can be everything and all of it. We can be all of it.
Yes.
It's these boxes that we get shoved into that I think start to limit our world.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Mm-hmm. But now, I know you've shared that your current relationship is.
Yeah, no, I found
much more open.
A wonderful person who's like just as open and accepting of all my parts as I am them, so it's great.
Yes.
It's nice.
I'm so glad.
They also had that experience of, kind of taking on like a man, kind of man role, or just kind of having like very remote, emotions, and even, just being non-expressive, just kind of in the back, cool. But then they could never be loud and make like sexy, or like, just feel themselves in a different way. Like, it was just not part of the relationship. And I'm like, how sad to feel limited when relationships should be a place where we feel free to be us.
Yes. That's huge. I'm sure that deserves its own podcast in and of
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah. I think so too. No, definitely. Yeah. But
um,
yeah, it sucks. I mean, yeah, we shame each other in all these different ways. It's just ways we learn to function in the world, you know? Awareness is what's key, you know? And I feel like I grew up in a family of like very observant people. Like when you're quiet, you observe. That's what you're doing with your time, right? And so I think that power of
mhm.
observation has helped me like a lot. Prior to healing, like I really didn't feel like I identified with anything that's like kind of described as like a Virgo trait. But now that I've done a lot of like therapy and just kind of come to more of like who I actually feel like I am and been able to express it. Now a lot of those things that they describe, I'm like, oh yeah, I totally do that. Or, you know, like I just feel like naturally inclined to do that. So I'm like, that's funny that this horoscope says somewhat of the same thing, but you know,
You take, yeah,
it's
you,
fun. It's fun.
it's,
You know, some people are like, oh, how can you do that? Or like, they're just naturally oppositional. My partner's like very naturally oppositional. And they're
okay.
like, oh, like, I don't believe in that. But then I'll read them their horoscope and they'll be like, let me see. Let me see
Let me
that.
look at
Let me
that.
look at it.
I know some
So,
people who base, and I don't know if it's a generational difference, but some people base who they're going to be in a relationship with on horoscopes. And I was like, wow, no, actually that doesn't factor in for me, but for some people it's very serious.
yeah,
It's interesting.
that Indian matchmaking show on Netflix.
Oh
They
yes,
said
love
the
that show.
matchmaker on that show said that like that the astrology match has like a high match rate and people stay together. So I was like, wow. Not that I'm going to do that, but you know,
Right.
I was fascinated that they even used that as part of it.
Yes.
I was like,
Yes.
ooh, that's cool.
I know. They churn out like, I don't know, like a 40-page document on each person and their biostatistics. That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
That's what the matchmaker said, that there's a higher rate if these criteria are met, or it's interesting. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to share about your journey, Lani, about dealing with, your own experience with shame and healing, and anything that you'd want to share with anybody else who might be in your similar set of circumstances or had a similar experience?
I mean, I do want to put out there that the reason, so my partner comes from a family that's very more well off financially than mine is. And that is largely a part of why I even got access to the couples therapy that I did and some individual therapy. And so, like, that's part of what I mean when I'm like, people like me often don't end up in a place, in such a different place. It's largely because of that. I happened to meet somebody and fall in love with someone who just had the resources. It's like, that's why I say luck, because I'm like, who knew? Like, in what world would this have happened to me? You know, like, so I think I did struggle with like how random and unfair that like so many people don't get access to this, and I just do. So that's why I do want to screenwrite, because I feel like when people don't have the words to be able to like go to therapy, or like, or I'm sorry, the resources to go to therapy, or they can't. I think cinema taught me a lot. Like stories of different people taught me a lot. Like the stories I watched on TV and in movies growing up taught me a lot, or helped me feel, you know? So like I want to tell stories and write stories that I feel like can communicate new things that we have not seen on screen. The art that I love has affected me in such a profound way. So I'm like, I can do that. It's like a free therapy. Well, not free, but like, you know, it's
Yeah.
another form of kind of
Mhm.
like understanding more and having new ideas. It's like, that's what the purpose is for me, to want to connect with folks who like maybe won't ever have that opportunity. So like, that's, yeah, it's nice to, because I felt so like purposeless and kind of meaningless. I'm just like, okay, I'll just, I guess, work a job and try to go on a couple of vacations a year, or one maybe, until I retire, and then that's it, you know. It's like, that's actually part of the reason I don't want my own children, because I feel like for so many years I lived in such a kind of a closed off, sad place, that I would feel like I wasn't really living. And so now that I've healed in this way, I almost feel the freedom of a child, like where I can be anything, do anything I want. I'd be an artist. I can do different things as long as I have enough to keep, the roof over my head, like that I can do anything I want to do. Like if I want to change careers 3 or 4 or 5 times in the next 5 years, I can do it. Like if I want to take those risks, like once you start taking risks, it becomes a lot easier. Especially the biggest work is with yourself. Like once you've done, like kind of gone to a lot of therapy, or like once you really realize like who you are, like nothing can touch you, like nothing can really like break you. Like that's the hardest work you'll ever do. That's what me and my partner say. We're like, the hardest work we ever did has been done. And so if we need to, anything uncomfortable that might come with, learning new things or engaging with, new clients, or learning, more about the professional world or the business world, or just trying to make it as like a business owner, which we own our own business, our own small business. Like all of that stuff seems way easier once you've done a lot of internal work like that. It's just like, oh, nothing's going to be as heavy as that stuff was. I can do it. Like even if it's a little bit of growing pains, it's always a little awkward. There's always anxiety meeting new people, talking to people on the phone. I'm not into talking to people on the phone. If you could text or email me, that's amazing. So, but there's always little things that come up, but on the whole, it's never going to be anything even close to how heavy it is to kind of reinvent yourself or become more of who you are.
Amen. That's really powerful. And I feel like you and Sarah and I are sisters, because I feel the same way about the healing work and that sense of inner confidence where you're like, nope, I've faced the scariest, most painful stuff the inside of me that I could. So yeah, nothing else is going to take me down. It's true. It's so true.
That's right. That's true.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Lani. Before we go, I want to ask the question I always ask my guest at the end, which is, which television show, it could be new, it could be old, do you recommend and why?
Such a hard decision. Pose, the show Pose. I don't know if you've seen the show Pose. Yeah, Pose.
Yes.
I have a few swirling in my head, but Pose, I think, has been the most beautiful show. That shows like Black and brown queer folks in New York, in the city, in the ball culture, like ball voguing culture, and the homes that they create with one another, and the families that they create with one another, and just the innovation and the creativity. My favorite documentary is Paris is Burning. And so when I saw Pose, I was just, I was starving to see that era on screen. So yeah, I was identified with like folks like that. I don't know quite why. I think I was just astounded by their creative innovation and their artistry. Affected me so profoundly. Watching the documentary and the show, you're in a world that doesn't like give you any positive like support, and that you have to face so much adversity and death and all kinds of things. But the fact that you have the art and that you can express yourself is like, it gives you everything you need. And yeah, that totally resonates with me for sure. I love that show. Recommend it so much.
Thank you. Yes. Hear that, everybody? I love that show too. I'm still working through season 1, I think, but that's because I have like so many things to watch. Okay. I will get back to it. Lani, thank you so much. Yes. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I'm wishing you even more happiness, more enlightenment, as Mama would say, your mama, and look forward to seeing the films that you are writing for.
Thank you. Yeah.
However they manifest.
Yes. Thank you so much. This has been an honor, for real.